Free tuition coming to New York's public schools. There is a lot of strings attached and also a fair share of critics. But Governor Cuomo, he was able to get this passed as part of a recent budget negotiations. There is, though, an income cap on eligible families. This year, it's $100,000, and it goes up to $125,000 by 2019. And there is also, as I said, those strings attached. Students must graduate on time, that's 4 years. They have to get good grades and pledge to live and work in New York for 4 years after they graduate. Now, critics on the left are saying this doesn't go far enough because books, dorms not included. On the right, critics say it's akin to socialism and it piles even more burdens onto an already high-tax, high-spending state. And they also say private universities will suffer and some could even shutter their doors. Joining us now, the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Purchase College, Barry Pearson. Barry, thank you. Well, first off, I know we got some people at this table here on both sides of the aisle who aren't too crazy about all the elements of the plan. I think it's a great idea, but let me give you some of the questions. Sure. First off, it seems to help the folks in the middle class. Right. But the criticism is if you're on the bottom end of the spectrum and you're impacted by TAP and some of the other programs, this doesn't change your life at all. And in fact, arguably, it complicates because some of the CUNY schools, not SUNY, but they're going to even raise tuition. Fair?
Well, look, I think the big context here is we're finally having a conversation about college affordability. So I appreciate the governor's attempt to kind of pull back the onion on this so we can have the conversation. It's great to finally hear the press talk about the cost of books and tuition, room and board, because for a long time we've had a fixated conversation around tuition. So this will help a lot. It'll help families a lot. But I agree with Governor Cuomo's point. For some students in a certain age bracket, they should go to school, and they should focus on going to school, and they should focus on getting out in 4. Sometimes we extend the conversation by saying 5 is okay, 6 are okay, but what happens is debt piles up. So you have young people graduating with insurmountable amounts of debt that they will not pay off until they're into their 40s. So I appreciate his focus on the 4-year. I appreciate his focus on going full time. I think the nuances of how you then are able to leverage other dollars in the room and board piece. Because what's lost in this conversation is it's a last dollar in program. So
explain what that means.
So it means after all the other dollars come in, Pell, TAP, EOP money, the Excelsior kicks in. So what's hidden here that we're able to explore as a college now is we put money towards scholarships, institutional dollars. Now, can we take those institutional dollars and put them somewhere else to support students? Can we put them towards residence hall scholarships? Can we support board? So I think it'll give us some latitude here to promote what we all want, which is degree attainment.
From the criticisms of the no free lunch, this isn't your problem, but some said the state still doesn't know how many kids they're talking about. Somebody says 80,000, some say 200,000. Again, you guys would be the beneficiaries, but do you have the sense the state has their act together in terms of how many kids we're talking about and also what the total price tag at the end will be?
Well, here's why you can't know that. It's human behavior. I mean, some students may opt out because of the residential piece of it, right? Some students may say, I know I'm not going to be able to live in New York, so I may opt out of the Excelsior program and take a loan.
I am hearing, though, and you by now would have a good sense, applications are up, and they're up in a big way at some of the state, not only universities, but also the CUNY schools, too, that as a result of this program, you're going to see a lot more kids that want to come through your doors.
I think so. I think we're going to know more in June and July as this rolls out a little bit more and as there's more details. I mean, the good news for us, at least at Purchase, is that we were sitting in terms of a position of strength with admissions already. So our challenge actually is how do we make room?
Now, I know you're a nonprofit, okay? Right. So this is, when I ask the question, I don't mean this literally, but were you guys in the black? Were you guys making money on an annual basis?
No, here's the piece of it that's really a struggle for us, which is we are all about access and affordability for students across the spectrum. And so for a long time, higher education and its rate of raising tuition outpaced other kind of dimensions that you measure expense. In terms of cost of products, we were way above that in terms of our overall raises in tuition. So I think one of the things that we've had to do is what is it that we fill? How do we fill that gap between what students pay and what it costs to deliver that education?
So if a kid, and you can even do this for a household that's making more than 120 grand or 100 grand right now, what does it cost to go to Purchase, from the tuition, and throw in the room and the board and the books and the whole kit and caboodle? What does it cost a family to put a kid for a year of tuition and everything to go to a SUNY school?
I think our total cost of attendance, which is how you measure it, is into the 20s. So you're talking room, board, tuition, and that's a public, right? And so we are very affordable in this mix.
Absolutely.
So it is a expensive proposition.
Now, I have spoken to other folks on the private side, and they say, we're getting killed here. Picking Adelphi as an example, right. Okay? Somebody or a university that is alike, because SUNY, not because you're sitting here, you guys have a very good academic reputation.
Right.
If you're a parent right now and you say, wait a minute, I can send my kid to a private school where it's coming in my pocket, or I can send them to a SUNY school, and if we fit into that threshold where we're not beyond the cap, what are you, crazy, Junior? You're going to SUNY, right. Assuming you get it in.
Right.
I got to imagine, and it's not your responsibility to be concerned about the private end of this, but they're going to get crushed.
Well, my previous life before Purchase was in a private, 23 years. So the piece of this that privates will adjust, how they'll adjust, is the discount. Privates institutions have the latitude to discount tuition and room in ways that publics don't. So that sticker price, right, that you see for privates is drastically discounted. I think what privates will do is figure out ways to compete through discounting their tuition and discounting the board and room. So I don't, having come from a private institution, I know they have avenues to compete. I think the question is, at the end of the day, with the current decline of total number of high school graduates coming out of schools now, will we have the same number of institutions across the spectrum, private, public, and the like?
Want to jump in, guys? Since when have you four ever been quiet? Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, one, Richard, they do an excellent job at SUNY Purchase. And I do have a bit of a issue here, because on May 19th, my son is graduating from this institution. So I have, and he's a special needs student, a lot of special needs. So they're doing an excellent job.
You don't have to butter him up, he's getting the diploma anyway. Yeah, so.
They're doing a great job. But Richard, my only thing on your overall point is that for all the naysayers and the critics, let's keep in mind this is a starting point. And why are we so concerned with the privates when, before this program came along, any parent knows you can send your kid to a public institution for about half of what you can do annually at a private institution. So the privates had a problem, and just last night at Colgate University, I'm not going to get into the specifics because you're going to see I'm focusing on race, but at Colgate last night, they had an incident where a black student was walking through campus, a private institution. Somebody thought that the gun that the young man had was a real gun. It was a glue gun for his class. They shut down campus. Now I'm just pointing this out.
Where are you going with this, Tom?
Because Richard, yeah. I'm pointing out my world. Yes. My reality. And so I don't see why anybody, frankly, should be concerned about the private institutions. That's the reason why they're called private.
Except, while you knew you were paying a premium to go to a private, now it's an all or nothing proposition, even though, and hopefully I'm going to learn on the positive side when I send my kids, that you can actually negotiate what you pay to these institutions.
Yes, you can.
Yes.
I also want to say, I think going back to what Bernie said last year, on the campaign trail and whatnot, many folks are now going to be able to go to college that might not necessarily have been able to before, and/or they're not going to have the debt coming out of college that they would have originally. And because of that, they may go to the privates for graduate and postgraduate type of classes. It's sort of like elevating the ladder for where people are in terms of higher ed, and they'll get to that next level, and maybe they'll go to law school or medical school or something else at one of these private institutions.
And I think the beauty of the program is that it helps us talk about student debt.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at student debt as a whole, it outpaces credit card debt now. So if you think about what we're burdening our young people with as they move into the future, what scares me is the debt. And we talk a lot about financial literacy at Purchase, because one of the things that we see students doing is not always making the best decisions when it comes to financing their education.
Barry, if you could, and you're going to stay with us on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about other issues on college campuses, but what is the main driver for the explosion of tuition? Like, I literally graduated, I don't know, 25-something years ago from college. It is triple the annual tuition from what I paid.
Right.
Why? Inflation's not triple. What leads to that?
Well, I think there are a number of factors. One, competition. You know, I mean, higher education moved from kind of a special place as an industry to a very mature industry, meaning we were competing for fewer number of students. So a lot more institutions, the same number of students, basically, and that's been dwindling for a while now. So it's not the heyday it once was, where, you know, as an institution, you were guaranteed to kind of get your percentage of students. You really had to start competing. Well, what that did was it introduced the whole idea of brand value, right? So you wanted to be associated with a certain echelon within the brand segment, right? So if you charged the right amount, you could look like a certain quality. I think what happened was that started to skew how tuition got raised, and the untold story on that back end is what institutions were discounting. So on the market end, you look like a certain institution. On the back end, you were discounting tuition like crazy to get the students through the door. That's one piece of it. The other piece of it is that institutions more and more have to do a lot more than they used to. You mentioned your son Dominic as a student who we had to be able to provide special supports for. I mean, you shared this openly, so I'm just kind of going to go with it. We're seeing that a lot more. We at Purchase now have launched a brand new program for students on the autism spectrum, because they are capable of doing the work, they just need support. Well, that adds an expense, right? And 30 years ago when I first got into this business, we weren't talking about students on the spectrum.
Right.
So when you talk, and you can see this in the public schools now, right? K through 12, they're really having to offer a lot more services. That's an expense.
I want to keep this conversation going. When we come back, we're going to talk to the provost and the table about free speech on college campuses. We've seen Berkeley erupt over controversial speakers. Should they be allowed or should they be blocked? We'll talk about that after this.